Okay, class, so since we've been learning about the Great Gatsby, we've been reading it, we've read the first few chapters. We are now going to talk about some of the symbolism that is present in the book. So, let's get started. Alright, so first off, one of the most obvious examples of symbolism in the Great Gatsby is the green light. And the green light is a light at the end of Daisy's dock, which is visible somewhat from Gatsby's lawn. And in one of the early chapters, we have a vision of Gatsby looking out at this light. And this is a very significant image, and it kind of gives us several clues about what this green light means. So the green light represents Gatsby's hopes and dreams for the future. And because Gatsby's quest is to find Daisy and win Daisy over for himself, this quest kind of parallels the American dream. And because of that, the green light is also representative of the goals that we have for the American dream, about expansion and free will and being able to make something of yourself. So the green light is Gatsby's guiding light in the darkness. And so here's the quote from chapter 1 that deals with the green light. So, he stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and, far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily I glanced seaward, and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been the end of a dock. And so that is Nick observing Gatsby looking at the light for the first time. So our second bit of symbolism is the Valley of Ashes, and this is a stretch of land between New York and West Egg. And it is become desolate because the industries were dumping all of their ashes there for years. So the people who live in the Valley of Ashes are typically poor, down on their luck, don't have a lot going for them. Like George Wilson. George Wilson has his garage in the Valley of Ashes. So the Valley of Ashes represents the plight of the poor, because they can't really escape from this. It also represents moral and social decay, which has resulted from the uninhibited pursuit of wealth. So like people like Gatsby and Buchanan, who are just greedy and going for all the wealth and indulging themselves. So here's the quote that deals with the Valley of Ashes. This is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with a transcendent effort of ash-gray men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. So here is some images so that you can kind of picture what the Valley of Ashes looks like. The top image is artistically rendered. We can see the billboard there, and over here we have Wilson's shop, and you can see New York is in the distance, and there's some of the industries that dumped the ashes there. And down below, this is an image from the most recent Great Gatsby movie, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, and this is the image of Wilson's garage. So, yeah. Okay, so our last image is the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. And what this is it is a old billboard that hangs over the Valley of Ashes, kind of close to George Wilson's shop. And this is a billboard of fading, bespectacled eyes advertising for Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. And the eyes are said to represent the eyes of God. So the eyes of God are judging American society as a moral wasteland and drifting away from the American dream. So this meaning is never said outright. It's only implied but it only is implied in George Wilson's grief-stricken mind. So from this, we might also assume that the interpretation of the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg representing God could also be fake, and that people are the things that give other things meaning, and that this is arbitrary, and that in reality, the world is just meaningless until we give it meaning. So, here we have the quote from Chapter 2 that describes the billboard. But above the gray land and the spasms of bleak dust which drift endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose. Evidently, some wild wagon oculist set them there to fatten his practice in the boroughs of Queens, and then sunk down himself into eternal blindness, or forgot them and moved away. But his eyes, dimmed a little by many paintless days, under sun and rain, brood on over the solemn dumping ground. I followed Tom over a low, whitewashed railroad fence, and we walked back 100 yards along the road, under Dr. Eckelberg's persistent stare. So there's a picture of the billboard, and I think this is probably the most accurate picture of what the billboard would be, but it doesn't necessarily give the impression. So this next image, I think, gives more of the idea of the unsettling, godlike appearance of the eyes that is described in the book. So that's all I have for you today. So as we continue reading the book and working on the material, keep these different symbols in mind, and we will forge ahead.